Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Airworthiness Management and Aircraft Records series. My name is Jack Tunnell and I'm your host for this series. As I discussed in part 1, the PIC is primarily responsible for the airworthiness of the Part 91 aircraft the PIC is flying, whether owned, rented, borrowed, or paid to fly. So what does the FAA expect you to know at a minimum? Amazingly enough, this is explained, sort of, in the Airman certification standards. So in this part, I'll take you through the information, give you a few explanations, and try to get you thinking. This is what page 4 of the Private Pilot Airman certification standards looks like. The FAA wants you to know all this as a private pilot, but the regulations, as we discussed in part 1, put this responsibility on a student solo pilot also. It doesn't seem like that many words, but they are powerful and complex. Take a minute and read down through the sections. I'll go through the most important items. The objective, it seems, is that the FAA wants you as the PIC to know how to evaluate airworthiness of the aircraft you're going to fly. They're going to give you some specifics, but the important words here are exhibits satisfactory knowledge and skills associated with airworthiness requirements. When you see certificate location and expiration dates, what do you think of? That must be airworthiness certificate and the registration certificate. Is that all? What about the type certificate and its representative in our world, the type certificate data sheet? What about supplemental type certificates? Do you know where to find these? And do you know what information they can give you that relates to the requirements on this page of the ACS? Here's a teaser. There's a lot of information in those certificates that you will need to know. Required inspections in aircraft logbook documentation. I will wave you off of the word logbook and replace it with records. Logbooks are just a style of record maintenance and presentation, a poor one at that. Much more on that later. The FARs mention aircraft records, but never mention logbooks. Back to required inspections. Do you know all the required inspections for the aircraft you fly? If you say annuals and 100-hour inspections, that may be correct for your aircraft, but will not be all-inclusive. Is an ELT inspection required? Does it have to be tied to the other inspections? Are the transponder and air data inspections required? Can a STC include an additional inspection? Are pre-flight inspections required? If you're operating a large aircraft, you may be looking at more inspections than you can remember. Do you know the aircraft records documentation for each inspection or maintenance item, including the required information plus the information that is very good to be included? Airworthiness directives and special airworthiness information bulletins. There is just no way for a renter pilot to know the ADs on rental aircraft, the amount of documentation and aircraft knowledge required to accurately and completely be knowledgeable about the ADs and SAIBs on an aircraft is staggering, and a complete review can take a huge amount of time, even on a simple aircraft. The best a renter can do is find the AD listing for the airframe, engines, props, and appliances. Read them and ask questions about anything you don't understand. There will be a complete presentation on ADs after I address the required background knowledge and documentation. You may be asked about ferry permits or special flight permits. They are referenced in FAR 21.197 and 21.199. You'll have to have a FSDO involved in the issuance, so they will guide you with what you need at the time. Preventive maintenance. The items available for pilot performed maintenance are listed in FAR 43, Appendix A, Item C, Preventive Maintenance. It says, preventive maintenance is limited to the following work provided it does not involve complex assembly operations. If you as a pilot want to perform preventive maintenance, you must become familiar with the performance and recording rules in FAR 43. Can a student pilot perform preventive maintenance? Can a pilot perform preventive maintenance on an aircraft that pilot doesn't fly? You'll need the same training as an A&P for the task you want to perform. You'll need to perform the task per the current manufacturer's maintenance data. You'll need the correct tools and equipment for the task. When completed, you must record the task as required by FAR 43 in the aircraft records before flight. This will all be covered in future parts of the series. Do you understand the regulatory impact of operating with inoperative equipment? Do you understand where master and minimum equipment lists come from and their relationship to the aircraft-specific minimum equipment list? Do you understand how to use them? Do you understand where kinds of operation equipment lists come from and how to use them? Is there a system for recording discrepancies and creating placards that could go with the aircraft you fly? Do you know how to use the discrepancy system? If you're renting, there may or may not even be a discrepancy recording system. If you own and operate your aircraft, you can implement your own discrepancy recording system, and I will describe a great one in a future presentation. Do you understand the risks involved in initiating a flight with inoperative or missing equipment? The risk involved in a day flight with an inoperative position light may be low, but how risky is it? How risky is a flight with an inoperative fuel quantity indication system? How risky is a night cross-country flight without a nav instrument or GPS? How do you answer the regulatory question, why did you depart with this component or system in op? How do you answer the risk management questions on the same item? Locate and describe aircraft airworthiness and registration information. The registration information question may seem straightforward, but how do you validate that the registration certificate is current and valid for your aircraft? The airworthiness information question is sort of like, how big is the universe? You may think the airworthiness certificate is the answer, but it is barely the start. Do you have all the appropriate required operating manuals and operating limitations in the aircraft? How do you know? Can you verify the current aircraft time and, if required, landings? Can you verify that all the required inspections are current? Have you looked at the actual aircraft records and found proper information in the sign-offs? Have you found the weight and balance information and the equipment list? Do you understand it all? The list goes on and on. If I was to give a scenario, I would ask the relationship between the weight and balance information and the equipment list. Then I'd ask you to validate that the weight and balance is current and correct. Your chance of success on this, even if you know how, will be less than 10% based on the aircraft records that I have audited. I'll teach you how, but I can't make it quick or easy. For the inoperative equipment, I would give a scenario where your electric flaps are in op at a remote airport. Can you get it home legally and safely? What steps would you take to make the legal, safe judgment? How do you record and or placard the discrepancy? Fortunately for all you pilots and students, your CFI probably won't know how to do this, so won't ask you. It'll probably be the same with your designated pilot examiner. We're back to the same picture we looked at in part 1, the introduction. Now we have way more questions than answers. This is the same homework as listed in part 1, the introduction. Hopefully, after looking at these documents, some answers and more questions are forming in your mind. As always, send me your questions and I'll answer directly and add your questions to future parts of the series. If your question is, Jack, why are your presentations so bad? The answer is that I have extensive training experience in aircraft operations and maintenance management, none of which made me a good presenter. Ask good questions, give suggestions, help me get better, or just watch the presentations and learn. I've got a lot of knowledge to share. You will get your money's worth. Thank you.